Hello and welcome to yet another Human Synergistics Roundtable session. This is our sixth. My name is John Van Etten, and I'm very happy to join you today for a roundtable session. This proves to be an exciting one. I'm really looking forward to it because we've got a lot of really new things to discuss. First of all, I'm joined today by a new coaching and consulting group. It's not about the name, who have fantastic experience using human synergistics tools for leadership and culture development. We'll also be talking about a new case study, client reference and experience, best practices learned from that. And we'll also talk about the new topics of agile leadership, agile cultures, and how do we adapt to AI. And finally, the last topic I have is the new digital LSI, Lifestyles Inventory from Human Synergistics. We have a brand new online live dashboard format of that instrument to show you that's really exciting. So happy to take the time with you today and catch you up on all of these new things. First of all, I'd like to welcome to our stage, first of all, Ali and Juli of It's Not About the Name Consulting. Welcome, guys, to our roundtable. So happy to have you with us today.
Hi, John.
Hello, everyone.
Fantastic. So this is live session. We will be recording it and it'll be on our website if there's anything you want to catch up on later. Please feel free to write in comments if you have any questions during the session of anyone. We love to make this as interactive as we can and share learnings and insights. So again, really excited to take the time with you in this special roundtable just to hear from you around your experiences. Ali and Juli, we've been working together for a while. Ali, particularly, what's it been? Probably 5 or 6 years of leadership and culture development and journey, really exciting and successful track record. So everyone's always clamoring for what works, how do we create this change? And I've been really looking forward to having you guys on because, not to get ahead of ourselves, but the leadership and culture initiative that you were a part of is one of the real shining examples. It really ticked the boxes in terms of what are the best practices, how is this done in an ideal case. So a lot of really great examples. I'd love to see this published in one of our upcoming books, like Creating Constructive Cultures, real case studies on how organizational change is done. And this will be a really exciting one. So please, Ali and Juli, thank you so much for joining us and love to hear about you.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure being here. You said it's shiny. Today is actually shiny. I don't know if this is a coincidence, but probably it's a good time to talk a bit and share some knowledge with our people and our community and network. So thank you. Being a pleasure being here today. Juli, what about you? Are you happy too?
Hello, everyone. Hi, John. Hi, Ali. It's a pleasure to be here with you on a Friday afternoon. And as John said, we have a lot of experience with the human synergistics tools. And today is about sharing that with the community, what we have seen, what worked, how have we applied it, maybe also that other consultancies, other companies, teams can benefit from the insights and also from our experiences with cultural assessment, leadership assessment, and organizational change. So excited to be here and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. As am I. So a new consulting coaching group, and the name of the group is It's Not About the Name. I have to say, when I first heard it, I absolutely love it. Can you tell me more about why you chose that title?
Yeah, maybe I take that. Actually, it's also still funny for us, and it's funny if people are asking, "Hey, what's the name of your company?" And then we stop a bit and pause and say, it's not about the name. And then most people say, "Okay, what is it then about?" And then most likely we say it's about you, and I'm helping you out wherever you are and pick you up. And actually, then like 2 minutes later, people then still asking, what is now the name? And we say, it's not about the name. So that's the name of the company. So that's a funny conversation sometimes we have. And when I remember back, like where we're starting with Juli sitting together and working out how we want to help this world is that we had, I think, spent, Juli, correct me if I'm wrong, like 3-4 hours around talking what should be the company name, and we had different names in the beginning. We had like, want to provide space for people, so is it just a space, or is it another you, another me? And of course, you know, in times of social media, you look on social media if this is a name would already exist or not. And of course, in our world, a lot of things exist. So after some time and saying, you know what, we're now discussing 3 hours about the name, it's not really about the name, it's about the people, it's about the individual, it's about the group or the organization we want to help. And then we said, okay, you know what, then let's just take it's not about the name, because it's really not. And as Juli in the beginning said, like it's about today sharing knowledge, and maybe that's for today the topic. So it's not about us, it's about you. That's the story.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that resonates so much. I mean, first of all, I love it initiates the conversation, right? Rather than talking about, who we are, it really cuts to the chase in terms of what's this really about? What are we trying to achieve? What's the true purpose? So I think I think it's a great name, very memorable, and a good way to get these conversations really kicked off and started. So.
Yeah.
Good. So, so when you say it's a focus on me, I'd be interested to hear more about that. So, how has that kind of changed the focus of what you do and inform how you work with clients?
Yeah, good question. Let me tell you a bit about our story. And I mean, we are familiar, we know each other, but maybe some of the audience who they hear in the live show don't know us, right? So maybe we do a short intro of us. And I was thinking, Juli, I introduced you and you introduced me. What do you think? Good. Okay. So you want to start?
Of course. So let me tell you who Ali is. Ali is a doer. He's an executor. So he's super creative. He's very innovative, and he occasionally dreams. When he dreams, he has a vision, and his biggest strength is not only to dream and to visualize, but to put that into practice. For example, he launched a corporate volunteering for a company that has more than 100,000 employees. And there was a lot of resistance for him to launch that corporate volunteering, yet he pushed through because he was convinced of doing the right thing. Additionally, he is a firm believer of communities, and he has a gift, a talent to bring people together. Ali is connecting people, and Ali is inspiring people. And how does he do that? With a lot of care, with a lot of empathy, and with giving people the space to feel seen, heard, and valued. So it's an absolute pleasure to work with him, to be inspired and dreamed of by daily. And of course, eventually, Ali is doing the best coffee.
That counts.
So, John, I have my flowers. Can I go out of the round table now?
You're happy. It's so good enough, right? Very good.
Thank you, Juli. Thank you so much. I would even not be able to describe myself like this. So thank you so much. So Juli. Juli is, Juli is my co-founder and my better half, maybe even to say, in this world we are in. And I think we have a lot in common and a lot of differences too, where we can compensate each other. And this means, like, sometimes when it goes into, I have always those new ideas, and Juli is very strong in strategy, for instance. That's one of her strengths, already thinking 5 steps ahead. So that's something, sometimes I need to not have every week a new idea and, what is disturbing the flow we have. But I want to describe Juli in 3 things. I want to mention one value Juli has, and that's connectiveness to people, connectiveness, especially to people who are giving her energy, and connectiveness to nature. And that's also a different, when we meet and have workshops, then Juli's the one bringing us into the nature and getting our head free to continue. So that's always something I really appreciate. Then one more thing is about her strengths. Besides the strategy, she's a learner. And most likely, I'm not really the learner. So that's something we really compensate well together. She started also now a new study, positive psychology. And she is like the one always being on the, being on the wave into the new learnings, bringing into our corporate, into our boutique, our coaching boutique, to progress. And Juli, I have also one trigger. I wrote down one trigger. What triggers her? And Juli triggers if there is no justice, if there is no equality in whatever around her, decisions, what was made, and or even personally or professionally. That's something. That's nothing. That's nothing for Juli, and that's something where she really want to have justice in the world and for her loved ones around her. Yeah. That's
Thank
Juli.
you, Ali.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Nice. Thank you. I think everybody
So
appreciates.
yeah.
Please, no.
I just want to come back to your question, because I think we are just spent now 5 to 10 minutes introducing ourselves. But you asked around the story, right, a bit, where we come from, and maybe that's also interesting for people. Maybe I just want to share that. Maybe even some people who are watching now knows that. So Juli and I worked the last 10 years in big corporate. And the last 4 years, we acted partially as leadership advisory when it comes to culture transformation in that big corporate. And I would say the last 2 years. The last 2 years, we worked as in-house coaches. In-house coaches for specific leadership, dynamics and or other transformation programs we have done. And in this part, or in this last, I would say 5 years, we gained extensive knowledge and capabilities when it comes to, moving from entertaining a leadership team, which is most likely in big corporates the case, into let them role model however they have to role model and behave to get the people along. So that's one part when it comes to leadership coaching. The other thing was, and here comes a bit together with what you have said, John, in the beginning, that we work since 4 or 5 years together, that we, diagnose and run a culture transformation within 24 months, where we have seen big results and big success about with the roadmap we have implemented. And I think the third thing comes also a bit together with Juli have said, was bringing people together and community building. That's something, we really enjoy and we really are passionate about, that building those lasting multiplier, change maker, whatever we want to call them, champions communities, helping creating movements. And the last one we have created was also inside the corporate, scaling from 0 to 2,000 champions in 10 months, 11 months, something like that. So that's something, we are passionate about what we do. And then there's something we always said, and I remember very valuably about maybe end of last year, we said, you know what? Once we are successful with the journey, with the transformation journey here in this function, we will bring this to whole Bayer. And after we have done that, we are going out and bring this to other companies. And if we have done that, we are going down to the root, to the system, to the government, and changing everything there till we have changed the world. And that's something, where our boutique is a bit coming back. Where in the coaching boutique, people are going in the boutique, you find great stuff and learn something about yourself and go out of the boutique. So that's a bit the coaching boutique, and comes good together with our vision we have in our company. It's not about the name, which is changing the world from the inside out, one person at a time.
I love it. And that aligns so beautifully with human synergistics and our changing the world one organization at a time. And very much agree and love the approach. I mean, the whole concept of, once we understand how to create real, positive, sustainable change, we grow that, we spread that, we leverage that. And that's true in organizations as well as much more broadly. So Love it. Thank you. Enjoy being on that quest with you. So, um, yeah, this is again why I'm excited to talk to you today. It's why I'm excited about the upcoming white paper case study we'll be putting out. So for anyone who's further interested in the story, hopefully we'll have that coming soon. But it's that combination of, a big corporate and, all of the challenges, big corporate environment, lots of complexity, restructuring, challenging leadership teams, and going in and utilizing a systemic, approach for understanding what is actually playing out, how is culture driving the performance of the business, what are leaders role modeling, what can we do differently, getting that message out. Like you said, another really huge strength is the network building. One of the things I really struggle with is, we could show leaders and organizations good data and what's happening and how and all of that, but it takes more. It takes sharing that and getting people on board and getting them willing to support this kind of change with their actions. And that kind of community building is what really makes not only culture and systemic change possible, but it's the secret behind making that happen quickly and sustainably. It's not something we can just dictate from, a leadership level and expect to happen. So how that's done, be really looking forward to those best practices. And anything you'd like to share now in terms of that as well. Really interested in high level learnings.
Yeah, so I mean, you have touched on important points, right? The systemic approach, how to make it sustainable, how to embed culture that is lived, and what do we
Right.
have to give to the leaders as tools, as techniques, so that they are able to, implement a change, as you said, fast, but also long-lasting. And for us, we are convinced that organizations don't change, but people do. And change management is bringing along the people. And one provider, it's called Prosky, they said very nicely that say, change management is an enabling framework for managing the people side of change. So organizational outcomes are basically the collective results of individual change. And Ali and me work on those invisible layers of transformation, the group dynamics, the behavior patterns, and the trust that make change sustainable. So what we have seen in cultural organizational work is usually you bring in systems, you bring in AI and digitalization, but you not necessarily co-create with the people around that to make it stick. You don't bring along the people, and that's where we come in.
Love it. Love it. Well, you mentioned a topic that I keep hearing about a lot. I mean, the consistent themes today seem to be, agility and change and the pace of change, as well as the implementation of AI. How do we adapt to that? How do we implement that? How do we do that in a way that is positive experience for our business, for our people, that contributes to our performance? You're hearing that as well from clients and organizations in terms of that need for development and growth?
Yes, definitely. So you mentioned AI earlier, right? It's the buzzword for everyone. Companies are scared on what can we do to work more efficient, more productive, and how can we bring it to our employees fast so that they do their normal job just with the help of AI. And the challenge we have is currently there's a lot of anxiety in the organizations. And we know from the work Human Synergistics does, from research, from positive psychology, from neuroscience, if the brain is in the fight or flight or freeze mode, it's very difficult to embed new thinking, to be innovative, to embrace AI and to work with it. So in order for AI and digitalization or transformation to work, we need to create a trusted environment. We need to create psychological safety. And what we have seen when it comes to change and transformation is that usually companies bring in a new operating model, a new system. They say we now work with AI, but they don't really have an approach on where to start. what is the desired outcome we are aiming at? What are the milestones? And here we find human synergistics tools very helpful, because we can do an assessment before we start anything. We can do a status quo analysis on where is the culture, and then also define how does ideal look like, where would we like to aim at, to achieve towards to, and then take those causal factors and what we know is working when it comes to change management and transformation, and help the organization move along so that AI doesn't stay a buzzword or is put in parallel to the people, but people embed it in their daily habits, in their daily work, and actually start really to work with it.
Yeah, it's something we've seen. I mean, AI is, of course, very new. I mean, what you're saying resonates because while AI, of course, is quote unquote new, the whole trend toward digital and moving things online and has been going on for decades. And one of the things that we've consistently looked at is how behavioral patterns in individuals, teams, and cultures influence the ability of people to adapt to those new circumstances, right? There are certain patterns in culture that support and facilitate, we'll talk about that moving forward, really enable people to be more adaptive, curious, flexible, learning in how they work and drive that agility. There are other patterns in culture and behavior that ultimately get in the way, hold us back, and cause friction as we try to move in those positive directions. So, getting very clear on what is actually playing out, what's enabling in our people, and what might be holding them back, so that we understand that cause, that there's where we work, right? It's one of those challenges. We can't just make people more agile or adaptive. We've got to encourage and role model and facilitate the kind of behavior that enables them to do that.
I love that what you're saying, John. It's not about bringing AI tools or systems into the organization and then people will somehow get along. It's about, first of all, I believe, of course, I think everything starts with building a common ground and understanding about what is it really, but then become our mind AI ready. This is what I'm always saying, how do you make your people AI mind ready, that they are able then to use whatever is on the market, right, as tool systems or ecosystems. So that's something, comes good together with what you have said from the behavioral pattern perspective. What do we really need to get our people AI mind ready, that then we can thrive with that?
Yeah, it's kind of a fun thought experiment, and we'll dig into it later today, but exactly that, what kind of behavior helps our people to be agile, flexible, and adapt to those changes, and what kind of behavior, again, gets in the way, holds us back. And thankfully, we've got lots of data to analyze, to be able to identify, what are those key ingredients that we need in this culture, in this team, or within our leadership to drive agility and flexibility as we adapt to these changes.
Cool.
Very good. All right. So what challenges do you find when it comes to transformation in terms of moving toward AI for leaders? Where are sort of those key hurdles that they need to overcome?
I can say one thing, and maybe you can build a bit, Juli. I believe one thing is that leaders are able to pick the people up where they are. So of course, first themselves, having that self-awareness and that growth mindset by themselves, but then enabling the team, going a bit less out of this telling, more into the asking mode of being a real leader and less manager, and then trying to go back and help them go along this journey of the constant change we have and had the last couple of years, and the dynamics we have. Every, 2 years, there's a new big transformation project, especially in big corporates. So people are confused in some or the other way. So what is the skill, the capability a leader should have going forward and pick the people up where they are and help them that they help themselves in the group to walk through that transition they are in. I think that's one critical capability a leader in my view should have. Anything from your end, Juli?
Yeah, I would like to emphasize what you just mentioned, right? The foundation is self-awareness from a leader, him, herself, but also trust and psychological safety. Currently, we were in a very disruptive world, and people are scared to lose their job. They're scared to leave the known environment. Leaving the comfort zone is never easy. And in order for a leader to make their team, their company AI ready, we need to provide an environment where people feel safe to be able to try, to be able to make mistakes, to be able to be not judged, to be able to see and to experiment what is possible. And this is only possible if we create that behavior. And you mentioned it, John, if the leader role models, is he also using AI? Is he also making mistakes? Is he also role modeling on how it could look like when you leave your comfort zone and create and build new habits or rituals, right? So what do we see in our environment, in the system? And is that encouraging us for more confidence to go out and try something different? So I think it's a lot of different patterns, but eventually we need a trusted and safe environment for employees to feel ready to start.
Like that, to feel ready to start. Yeah, good. I know, I agree, and it seems like today, with all of the change that's taking place and the pace of change, the things I find leaders are missing, and that really, I think, resonates with your points, is just clarity in terms of where are we really going, what are we trying to achieve, where are the priorities, kind of the big picture of what's the goal, what's the target, and then secondarily, kind of well, where are we right now and what can I do? It's really setting up kind of the goalposts of what are we trying to get toward, where's our starting point, and how do we start breaking this down into real, tangible, actionable steps to move our team, our leaders, our business in the right direction. And in your case, you used OCI and OEI, so I'm referring to human synergistics tools, organizational culture inventory, and the climate instrument, so measuring culture and climate. I had a slide or two just to kind of introduce this, but I would be interested to hear from you in terms of the benefit, if you saw, from using that kind of structured approach and that kind of diagnostic methodology.
Yeah, let me share a bit, because we have not only applied this in a company, we have lived that by ourselves and lived through that. So maybe I start with why we have chosen your tools, John, right? So and I think in mid-sized companies and corporate, you have most likely once a year a kind of employee survey, where people are asking at that specific time a feeling they have with specific questions. And of course, in our past experience, we had also those kind of employee surveys. And normally, or usually what is happening is that there is some results and there is some, I don't know, maybe pain points people are expressing. And what is then happening most likely is that smaller teams are coming together and making some, let's call it squad teams, are coming together and making some improvements with action points they want to do. And they're doing this every year. Somehow there is like a 3 to 6 months project, and then next year there's again an employee survey, and suddenly the score is somehow staying stable or even decreasing, and of course in some cases maybe even increasing. And at that time we said, hey, what do we really measure in the end of the day? And why it's always bouncing back? And then we said, maybe that's, what the people are answering. That's not the underlying issue. And with the actions we are doing on the small project teams, maybe that's just a plaster of the wound we have. So what is that what we really have to analyze? And of course, the last company where we were was a science-based company. So we say, hey, we need science-based data. We need science-based
Good, I
data because
agree.
we are scratching the surface, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? We want to work on the source, on the underlying issue. Can we focus on a science, research, data-driven organization? And of course, we said, no, we don't want to have like the big consulting firms with the 300 PowerPoints in the organization. How we can do it by ourselves for the people by using data. And there, we were searching on the market, of course, having some research, found a couple of organizations, and one was very impressed, saying, "Oh, that's cool data, and that's something what is really looking into the underlying issue, something we never did before." So we found human synergistics. We informed us about the OCI and OEI, as you can say, maybe for people better to understand culture and climate assessment. And then we mirror a bit the underlying issue. We give insights a bit to climate and culture. And then I don't know if I should continue or you want to explain a bit what is that OCI, OEI thing?
Why don't I, if that's all right, I'll just sort of interject here. I have a few slides.
Yeah.
And I think it's easiest if we'll just do this very high level. And really what we're talking about is organizational system measurement. So, we talk a lot about measuring culture and climate, but it really is a bigger picture of the organization as a causal system. So this is what we call our How Culture Works model. It's a 4-staged causal model measuring various factors of organizations and how they influence one another. So this is my fastest way to introduce this. I do that with this presentation talking about the 4 Ds: define, design, do, and deliver. So if we think about these as a process model, as one thing causally leads to the other, then we look at organizations starting on the left-hand side, we're defining values and purpose as a kind of a starting point. What is this company about? What are we trying to achieve? What is our purpose? What are our values? Once we hopefully are clear on what we're all about, then the next step is to design that organization. So this is with reference to organizational climate. These are structures and systems within the organization around things like what we reward, how jobs are designed, how goals are set, how leaders lead their people, so on and so forth. That design within the system of the organization then has predictive influence on how people behave within that system. And this arises culture, or how we actually do what we do, the actions we take or don't, how we approach our work, and how we interact with one another. Those patterns in terms of the current operating culture that are playing out then directly influence what we are able to deliver at the end of the day. And typically, we'll talk about this a little later on, we're looking at aspects of well-being of employees as well as performance. But this connects directly back to Ali's point around, global employee surveys are really just scratching the surface. Those questionnaires are usually measuring what we would call outcomes, or these deliverables on the far right-hand side. How motivated are our people? How creative are they? How to what extent can they approach their work in agile ways? Are they capable of adapting to new work situations? That is an outcome. It is an outcome of how we work in this organization, the behavioral patterns that play out. Those are driven by and influenced by systems and structures in the organization, and predominantly within climate leadership, by the way. So of all of the factors we look at that influence people in climate, leadership tends to be the most predominant. So understanding how those pieces differ and how they influence and impact one another in a causal structure in organizations is tremendously helpful for development, because if we can understand not just how agile and adaptive and creative our people are, but what patterns in our current culture are supporting or undermining that, and then are able to understand where those patterns are coming from in terms of leadership and climate, then we can be diagnostically specific in terms of what kind of behavior will promote agility in your business and what factors within leadership and climate must be addressed in order to drive and encourage that behavior that we need for that outcome. So it's a bit of a domino approach, but it's getting to the point of getting to the source of this, right? Rather than trying to put band-aids and treat symptoms, we're actually digging into the causal structure of the system to identify where this is coming from. Just to give you a positive example, it's a lovely organization that we've worked with for a number of years. I know this is too small. If you reach out, I'm happy to send you this case study and this data. But on the right-hand side, what we're seeing is a high-performing organization. These people are reporting that they are highly motivated, engaged, satisfied, agile as teams and groups, so on and so forth. That kind of high performance in organizations' outcomes we find associated with, effective outcomes and KPIs are associated with primarily constructive cultural norms. So it's not a mystery as to why these organizations are adaptive and effective. It's because their people are approaching their work in goal-oriented, collaborative, learning-driven modes. The reason that they're able to work in that way can be also identified in terms of what factors within the climate are functionally encouraging those patterns and what may be detracting. So this brings us back to of course, leadership and the importance of them walking the talk and living those values. And again, thankfully, this is something we can then connect all the way back to the organization's values in terms of what do we say we want here, what should be taking place, to what extent are we effectively enabling and encouraging those beat patterns, to what extent are they currently playing out within our organization teams and leaders, and how are those patterns currently influencing the well-being and performance of our people. Good. All right. So those are the 4 sections. Whoops. So I'll go back where there was a label on them. If there are any questions, please feel free to put that into the chat. But again, if we really want to create sustainable, real change in the area of things like adaptability to adapt to AI, we need to understand what behavior facilitates that, and we as leaders need to role model and encourage and facilitate those behaviors that are functional. Does that help?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I think that, for us, it was like, we are always measuring only outcome. So what about how people are behaving? And actually, what about, as you said, the middle part was the climate. What is that signals we are giving to people to behave in certain ways? And are we, have to change probably the climate factors to give other signals to people to behave in other ways? Maybe more constructive than passive aggressive, as you said, with those green and red and blue colors. Yeah, and what is it really we have to work on? Because most likely, in those employee surveys, it's like you do something, right? Well, you don't know if you really tackle the right things. And I believe that diagnostic you have just, the chart you have showed, it's really showing, okay, look, in those things you're really good, so continue. And in those things, there is room for improvement and you can work on. And you know exactly what you have to work on. That's also somehow what we have done.
Right. Yeah, I think the specificity is huge. The clarity in terms of where do we need to put our efforts, and yeah, indeed, it's. I always find it really interesting when you look at how organizations function without this input. When you look at what kind of questions they include in global employee surveys, you're right. It's like 80% outcome questions. The other thing they'll also ask about are climate questions. Things like, do you have access to your leader? Are you rewarded for good work? Those sorts of things. But it's a very incomplete picture. There's no understanding of how one thing leads to the other. There's no understanding of what's most important in the system, which is culture, which is a very challenging thing to capture accurately, and again is a bit of our specialization. So the point is that it's giving you not only accurate information, but like you said, the specificity that we need to know that if we put our efforts here, it's going to pay off. We're going to see that resonating and driving the kind of outcomes that we want. Cool.
True.
Very good. Goodness. So other advantages, if you can, before we move further to this kind of structured model, and one that I just have on the top of my mind, and since we're talking about, culture and leadership and so on, is the common language. Having one set of terminology and one framework to be able to describe, what we need from our people, how I should, the kinds of things I should role model as a leader, the kinds of things we need to encourage within our teams and groups. I've always found that having that language around, behavior and culture and leadership, teamwork is a very helpful one, especially for community building.
Yeah, true. I think, everything started with building common ground and vocabulary. Where we run with the journey where we are in, this is how we have started. We said, okay, look, first people, we have to speak a common language without labeling, like you're now, I don't know, red or green or blue. But having good intentions behind, maybe even helping each other, talking with that language, coming to the next stage of being more conscious about how we behave, for instance. And I think, when we were talking with Juli the week, like how we have done it really, like, can we just write it down step by step in a way? And we were thinking, okay, what do we have done in the very beginning? It was really this acceptance a bit, the preparation, explaining what is that diagnostic we are doing about, because of course people are also a bit tired of surveys and filling out surveys. In the end, of course, it's a survey people have to fill out to have the data and work with the data. But luckily, I think we have run the survey around 650, 700 people, which probably, I don't know, globally all over the world. In the function we were in. And afterwards, I think after we got the survey results, that was more the big part of where we brought everyone together and explained what does that really mean. And not with, of course, the wording we have in the diagnostic, because most people probably, if they are not, in that training we were in, will not get it. So we try to explain that in a way that is understandable for people. Like, look, this is what we do. Even when we, as you said, how do we promote people, right? So everybody, how do we do that? And, we have spoken this out with big cards. People was expressing this on big cards into the camera, with good things we are doing, but also with things we want to improve. So that's somehow, we have explained what came out of this diagnosis. What does that really mean? What do we focus on the next couple of months? So we did a kind of roadmap where we said, okay, look, these are the 3 things we will do. We will look into up and downward communication. We'll look into mission and philosophy. We will look into how we develop our leaders or growth overall in our organization. This is somehow what we started the first year. And then explain to people around stories around that, look, this is what we want to reach in the end of the day. That's a dream we have. And this is the first step we want to do. So that people know exactly what we are working on, and also being very transparent in what we do and showing where we are. That was something I can really encourage others to do the same, like building common ground, vocabulary, walking people step by step through that process, and helping them to understand really what is now different, what we do, or what is now different to what we have done before. So that was something really helped.
Yeah, love it. No, I agree. I think that systemic approach is really, really helpful. I also really like what you're saying about, again, focusing on the causal factors, those things that we can change. I always feel badly when you hear about organizations who are trying to drive whatever it might be, more agile, more creativity. And it's sort of the initiative is almost a sort of, well, we're going to tell everybody that we need them to be creative. We need them to try new things. It's sort of but unfortunately that just doesn't work, especially in culture development. It's not enough to tell people what you want them to do. We have to then follow that immediately with, and here's what I as a leader am going to do, and here's how we're going to do things differently here in order to support and enable that. So your factor, the things you were focusing on mission and philosophy and leadership, those are really great, especially first levers to address. I think when we're kicking off that kind of learning journey, it's a very good thing to start with. What is the mission and purpose of the business, or our part of it? What are we trying to accomplish and achieve? What are leaders responsible for? And get clear on those things. I think that's a very good first step in terms of climate to address. And you're doing what is true and what will resonate. You're not only talking about the importance of being agile so that we can accomplish our mission and purpose and so on. But again, you're taking the time, you're demonstrating it as leaders, you're building that network, you're doing the things that demonstrate that we're serious about this, but more importantly, we're literally facilitating and encouraging that behavior in our people and teams.
Juli, you want to share what was the biggest challenge and what worked well in the journey we were in?
Yeah, I mean, John already mentioned it, right? The clarity for people to understand where are we going and why are we going there. And Ali, you also said what was important was building a common ground, having a similar vocabulary so that we can understand in what holistic journey are we in and what is the benefit for me and what is my role in that, right? So I think the biggest challenge was that people were hesitant because they have seen so many transformation and changes and they just see another one. So why is this one different? What is it? Because usually people wait until the storm is over and then they go back to what they were used to do, especially in big companies where people are for a decade in one role, one department, or one team. It's difficult to change. It's difficult to adapt new behaviors. It's difficult to be in a new environment. So at the beginning, we had a low number of people in trainings and info session, and it was very difficult to communicate. So we needed a lot of patience, and I think consistency is also one of the key words. And the leadership, John, you mentioned it a couple of times, role modeling what we would like to see, how we would like the culture to be experienced. And by this also taking the boundaries a bit lower on, yeah, there might be a change and there might be a shift and being, yeah, meeting the people where they are and taking them in a very passionate and compassionate way on their journey of, yeah, we fundamentally don't only want to work on the band-aid, but on the core issues, because we know exactly what it is that we need to tackle.
Good. Yeah, I think I consistently say it's the clarity that this information gives people that makes it makes it useful and something that we can do, right? It's getting clear on, again, where we are, where we're going, and what are the steps in between to make that happen. And I will try not to get sidetracked on the topic, but it's not only is it hard to change, but I would argue that a lot of organizations have trained their people to resist change. There's a culture of, like you said, this is just the flavor of the week. We're just going to keep our heads down. If we wait long enough, this will blow past as well. That kind of culture and pattern can be particularly challenging when we really are serious about change. If we talked about this 20 times before, took some basic steps, but never really implemented and did anything that was impactful, then the 25th time that we do it, good luck. You're really going to experience the culture that you've created when you try to drive change in that environment. So I always try to help leaders to see that you're shaping your culture every day. If you're not encouraging your people to be agile, then you're encouraging them to be something else. So we need to think about that impact and how we use these things. So if we're going to have surveys and ask and collect this data, we need to do something with it. We need to act on it. And when we do, not only is that helpful, but you see people enthusiastic and actually wanting to answer surveys. It's not the questions, it's the lack of action, I think, that people are frustrated with. But that's the point of having causal structures and understanding why these things are happening so that we can actually do something about it. We can actually follow up on feedback with real actions that do actually lead to improvement. And that sends a whole different kind of message to your people about we do expect change. We do want it to be positive. We do want you to take part. Here's what it is. Here's where we're going. Here's how you can contribute. And that kind of culture is a whole different thing when it's time to approach change. Yeah. Good. The other thing you keep saying, and I really have to resonate, is patience and consistency. So I always find a lot of times clients, really try to jump ahead to the, okay, well, what do we do? Give me 3 things that I'm going to do with my team. And then that's great, and we can do that. But if we move a little too quickly, especially in the early stages, I think clients lose clarity around, well, what is this actually telling us? Why is this really important? Why should this be the top priority for our leadership team? And I really think slowing down, especially in the early stages of this journey, to understand the big picture concepts and get really clear, that's the foundation for the whole journey ahead. So congratulations on making sure you took the time necessary to get that crystallized so that everything else can flow as a result of that shared understanding.
Yeah, and maybe something to add to what you have said, John, is everyone wants to have a quick fix.
Yeah.
Well, like a sneak right or left or whatever, and then arrive there. Sure. But that's a topic where there is no shortcut. So you have to go through the process, through the phases, and everyone, of course, want to have action, yes, and at the same time, it just takes time if you want to work on the self-awareness of people, if you want to work on, we had that case, everyone was told what to do so far. So they really got used to that. So you said if you do not train on AI, you train on something else. So you train on that they're waiting, that someone is telling them what to do, and then they do. Until to a point they have forgotten to think.
Yes.
And that was, one really interesting story maybe I can explain. We had defined the frame, a kind of project, tried to provide it to people. And then people said, I don't know what to do. And I said, where are you stuck? And then the person said, I believe I forgot to think. And that was going out of telling into more into asking. That was one action we also have done when we talk about the climate. You were talking about, one of us was leadership, development, and growth, that we want to work on that and it is like it is, right? So most promotions in big corporates in the past was done based on expertise and not because of leadership skills. Yeah. So people were, that's how they were raised and how they get used at telling people what to do, and people were waiting for that. So more being in this manager role, and then we said, hey, we have to go out of this manager role into a leader role. So you have to tell less and ask more, and know where's the balance where you have to tell and where you have to ask. Right. So that was a big program we have implemented in the journey, and maybe that's interesting also for the audience. What are then the concrete steps you have done? So after we have, had the diagnosis, we have defined for us what is the roadmap, brought people to the space to understand what we are going to do. One of the things was that we said, and we want to focus on leadership development and growth for people. And when we talk about leaders, we said everyone is a kind of leader in the end of the day, even for yourself, if you do not have a team really to lead, which does not mean you need a team to lead, because people can also follow you, or you can create followership without having, let's call it, our lines in our wording. And what we have done was that we trained internal people about how to bring leaders and the organization to tell less and ask more. So it was like a coaching program we have really implemented into the organization, and we have almost walked, I think, 70% of the organization through that program of telling less and asking more. And what we also have offered to people was a strengths-based coaching after that. So it means what are your strengths? Are you aware of your talents? Can you implement or work on those talents to become a strengths? that comes a bit, I think, in your analysis with job design, that people work based on their strengths and not based on what is written in the job description. That was something, where people were like a year with the whole team in this journey of, working on their talents to become strengths out of this. And two more things was really important in that case. So the first thing, everything starts from the top, right? In the end of the day, they have to role model in some or the other way. So what we have done was a assessment, in your case was HS, you're calling it leadership impact, means like how leaders impact the way how others in their team behave in certain ways. Means like, I don't know, with the decisions you're taking, with the things you're saying, how you manage your calendar. So probably you can explain this better than me, but having this analysis around what is the ideal for yourself and what there's 360 are saying about you, how you're impacting them, that they behave in X or Y, Z ways. And then we said we are taking a year-long journey for them, with coaching and help to them to improve or come to their ideal state, how they want to be seen and how they want to impact others to behave, and work with the top leadership team, going into this leadership impact assessment diagnostic and really working them on individual base, but also on group levels, was having group goals. So that was something, which really helped from the top, role modeling that, because then of course the leadership team below them, they also said, okay, if my leader is doing that, probably I should do or go in the same direction. And by the way, can you help also my team with XYZ in the culture transformation? So that was a good, snowball effect.
Love it. Yeah, and you're bringing up another topic, which is the use of ideal descriptions. So for those who are watching, not only do we, as we'll talk about in a minute, look at behavioral patterns and how those actually influence performance and things like agility and adaptability, but we're also able to gather basically preferred or ideal descriptions. So your organization, your leadership team, you can sit down and describe and define for yourself what you want to see in your team, what should be playing out in this organization's culture, how I would like to be perceived by my people. And that kind of description is really interesting for a couple of reasons. One is what we find is the behavior that people say, I wish I was seen, I wish was happening, what they want is extremely consistent with what research says works. Human beings are pretty good at describing, the not only the behavior that we would prefer is consistent with the behavior synergistically with the behavior that enables us to get things done, right? People inherently want to contribute, they want to achieve something, they want to feel that their efforts count, they want to feel that they're making a difference. It's those inherent positive motivations that are not only described as appropriate and ideal by human beings with amazing consistency around the world, but are in fact the kinds of behaviors we can show do promote things like agility and innovation in people. So you get that really nice synergy. But the point, what I've always been amazed by is, even though we can show mountains of data in terms of how certain patterns positively drive performance, it's their own description that resonates far more powerfully, right? It's what we say should be happening in this business. It's how I want to show up to my people. Those ideal descriptions are something that are, resonate very deeply with people and are a great starting point for a leadership team to reflect on, what is good leadership here? Let's sit down and define that for ourselves, for our business, in our industry. What do we want? And getting that clear and tangible is, I think, a hugely powerful first step. Sorry. Glad you found that helpful as well. So, in the interest of time, again, we're going to have to do, I'm very much excited about our case study, because I think I know it's going to be a really exciting one with lots of helpful insights. But in the interest of time, before we move on to our other topics, anything you do differently moving forward, kind of lessons learned about maybe next time, what might we change?
Should I, Juli, and then you build on that? Okay. So I personally would do two things. a lot of things we have done really, really, really good, I have to say, right? We have built dedicated people working on that. So that's the first thing. Just mention also, what were the success factors? We have implemented one of those 3 people we were in, that this person is part of the leadership team and sitting on the same table with the leadership team and having eye-to-eye conversations. It's not there's something below and there's one sponsor and one steering committee. No, it's really eye to eye. So and then I think we have tackled a lot of good stuff. There are 2 things I would do differently. The first thing is, when we look to the climate factors, one of them is performance management. And if you're able to tackle that, of course, depends on the size, and we know corporate sometimes different. That's something I would really done right from the beginning, saying, whom do we promote? How do we promote? That's not always the loudest person in the room. That's not always the high potential being the biggest project, because we have a lot of introverts working very solid, having good performance in the back, but not very visible, because that's not just their type of nature being like that. So that we really focus on this. And the second thing is that we were really consequential right from the beginning for giving really good signals, what we tolerate and what not. Means having consequences. And I'm seeing this with a lot of clients we work together currently, and also in the past where we have worked. There is a lot of things we do, but there are never consequences. So if we talked about LI, for instance, right, leadership impact, and they have a year to improve, being more constructive in this case. And it could be even the team defining that. If you're not constructive or raised in this area or improved or growth in this area, what is the consequence? Are you then giving your leadership title up and someone else is doing that? Or are you, I don't know, even till you're leaving the company? Or so what is it really? What is the consequence? It's not just nice to have if you have improved or not. And I think defining that and holding yourself accountable for that is a good signal to everyone in the organization taking this topic serious.
Yeah, the accountability topic is a very interesting one, and can be challenging with individual level tools where people, their results are confidential and but one of my favorite best practices is using composite reports. So for those who aren't familiar, we can take individual level results for a leadership team, for example, and sort of pull all that data together into a composite profile. And, while it's no individual, it is something that we can talk about in terms of this is how the team is, showing up in terms of how they interact with their people. And it's also a profile that we can talk to in comparison with that ideal. When we sit down and talk about what is good leadership in this company, and then we look at how we as the leadership team are described, where are the similarities and differences? And that, I think, is a good way to hold a team accountable, especially because we can do this over time. So the purpose of these tools, I hope is obvious, is for development. And so they're not only used typically once in the beginning of these kinds, but we're checking in with leaders after 9 to 12 months. What's changed? What's working? Are we seeing improvement? Because it's not just about using the instrument, and it's about being able to demonstrate improvement and growth. And again, we can pull all that data together, keep everyone confidential, but show that the team's profile, again, the way we as a team are interacting with has shifted in the right direction. You don't get everybody on board in the first, but that creates the pull, it creates the learning, and we start the snowball rolling with that kind of approach. But it's an important one, absolutely. And I also like your topic of the kind of the rewards, benefits, compensation topic. It's a fascinating one in organizations and how that's actually done, and how that influences the behavior of people, and how often organizations, I hate to say it, but kind of get it wrong. They set up those systems in a way that either is not essentially equitable, or they set up those systems in a way that encourages people to essentially work against one another. For me to hit my numbers and KPIs, it means you can't, that kind of thing. And that's the kind of system climate that encourages counterproductive defensive behavior, competitive sorts of things, that ultimately, drives conflict and stress in your people, and ultimately detracts from their ability to do great work. fascinating how it all works, but it's a great learning for organizations to see what is this really doing. Here's how we're rewarding employees. What is that actually encouraging, and what is that actually leading to? And it's amazing how often companies just don't really know. They're doing what they think works. So.
Or what they have learned. Or
Yes,
they're
yes.
there where they are,
What's
which
worked
maybe isn't the right
thus
thing.
far? Yeah, exactly. It's not wrong in most cases. It's just not optimal. It could be a lot better. Yeah, that's really what you find. Okay, fantastic. All right. If there are any questions from the audience, please share those. I'll put out a little note here. I think I have there we go. For any questions in the chat from anyone, and then I think we wanted to switch gears just a little bit and shift from the case and your experience and background to a more specific focus topic around agility and adaptability, specifically to AI. But really, when we look at that kind of flexible, adaptive behavior in organizations, we find some real consistent patterns. So anything else about the case before we start talking about agile leaders, teams, and cultures, and what drives and what inhibits agile performance?
Juli,
All right.
anything from your end you want to add? It's maybe interesting or beneficial to the audience?
I think we already mentioned a lot of things, what drives or let's say empowers agility, and I think it's also giving people time. I mean, we talked about many things like being clear on what you want to achieve, creating an environment where people feel trust and safe to experience, walking the talk, being consistent in what you do, and eventually is also being patient. Well, changing behaviors, cultural change takes time, and allowing people this time to adapt to new situations.
Indeed. Good. Well, that's a beautiful segue into the next couple of topics, because we really, I think part of the purpose here was to create some clarity. And if we could just pick one sort of purpose around, well, we need to be agile, we have to adapt to the new upcoming AI, to answer hopefully some interesting questions around, well, what kind of culture and team dynamics and behavior, again, makes that possible, and what kinds of things get in the way. And with that understanding, then we'll even transfer into the last section of looking at the kind of report that we can provide to leaders to see how much of that behavior am I currently using, and what could I further leverage and develop. So hopefully these pieces will come together. Good. Let me just put up a quick PowerPoint. Hopefully I can do this pretty quickly. So the topic is around what behavior drives agile. So adaptive, creative, flexible behavior. So just a quick introduction. Of course, human synergistics, we have our circumplex model. That's a model to measure psychological and behavioral patterns that was originally developed to measure those patterns in individuals. But over the last 50 plus years, we've developed additional instruments to measure those patterns, not only in individuals, but also in teams and groups, as was discussed earlier, in terms of how leaders influence their people and teams, and also across broad organizations in terms of patterns in organizational culture. So that circumplex model, again, is used at every level, and that gives us the common framework and the common language that helps to define and describe topics like leadership and culture, and to make them tangible and clear. The purpose of measuring psychological and behavioral patterns is more than just curiosity, although it is very interesting. What's really exciting about these patterns is, firstly, that they are incredibly influential in terms of driving well-being and performance. Hopefully this isn't a big surprise. Your ability to perform, quality of your interpersonal relationships, those kinds of performance and well-being are directly a result of the actions that you take or don't, right? It's what we do that drives what we deliver. So understanding that causal relationship between patterns of behavior and how those influence well-being and performance is really the fundamental aspect of human synergistics. It's a causal model, so that we're not just telling you how you're performing, but why we're performing that way, and thereby what can be done differently. All right, if we try to be clear and focused here and talk about agile, so if we just consider the performance criteria we care about to be agility, then we can look at data. So we look at creativity, agile approaches, innovation in a variety of different ways. Here we're looking at some individual data, looking at creativity in leaders. We're seeing a profile on the top of leaders who score highly in things like creativity and adaptive approaches. The profile toward the bottom is the opposite, leaders who are less adaptive and creative. We also look at and measure this within teams and groups, how team dynamics and team behavior influences the ability of teams to solve problems creatively, apply lateral thinking concepts, and so on. Leaders, we also look at the extent to which leaders and managers encourage others, their team, to use and approach their work in creative and adaptive ways. And of course, we also look at the organizational level in terms of the ability of organizations to recognize a need to adapt, which I think most organizations today have recognized, and to proactively, functionally be able to respond to that need to adapt. So we look at that at the organizational level as well. So you probably have already noticed a bit of a theme as we look at those profiles in terms of what tends to relate to creativity and adaptability. And I'm going to refer to a couple of research articles that I'll share later on because we have this in good data. But the short answer is the two key styles that we'll talk about today are self-actualizing and oppositional behavior. There are actually 4 styles in the profile that are key to driving agility and creativity, adaptability in people, teams, and cultures. We'll just focus on 2 of them. If you would like to know what the other 2 secret ingredients are, please reach out. Be happy to share that with you. But for this, again, to focus, these are the 2 patterns that if we want agile leaders, teams, and culture, these are the patterns that we must focus on. So for the blue style at the top, that is self-actualizing. And we're seeing that we want and need a high extension of this. So whether we're looking at creative individuals, creative and adaptive teams, or highly flexible organizations, they tend to score at the 90th percentile or beyond in self-actualizing patterns. We'll look at what those are in a moment. Conversely, when we look at the oppositional behavior toward the bottom, we need less of this. The more oppositional behavior plays out within your leaders, within teams, or across your organization's culture, the less agile those people, teams, and system will be. And so what we're seeing here in the data is that we need to be at the 50th percentile or less in oppositional behavior. All right, so let's look at what these are, get a little context. So self-actualizing, why does that help agile so much? Well, self-actualizing behavior is about patterns that focus on possibilities, opportunities, even in challenging situations. So these are behavioral patterns that support open-minded approaches to work and unique approaches to solving problems. Self-actualizing managers have a balanced concern for both getting the job done as well as the consideration of their people and their team. And this kind of a pattern we consistently find supports enjoyment of work, the importance of, and recognizes and reinforces the importance of each individual member. And this is the broad category of behavior that most predominantly and positively drives creativity and agile approaches in people, teams, and organizations. Examples across level, just to give you a few. So if they're right, these are the various levels of our tools. At the very bottom, we're talking about behaviors in individuals that show up about things like being curious, being open to new experiences or new approaches, having your own unique independent perspective. When we look at self-actualizing behavior in teams, we're looking at things like teams taking on challenges, challenging assumptions, sharing ideas openly, creatively identifying opportunities. We find leaders who are promoting independent thought in their people, encouraging their teams to broaden their abilities and capabilities, and an organization that is innovative and future-oriented, a culture that encourages members to communicate ideas, learn, and so on. So hopefully, again, just to give you some little bit of detail around what are the kinds of behaviors, again, that play out in individuals and teams, you can see how having a common language to describe and understand what is self-actualizing begins and goes a long way to help me as the leader understand the kinds of things I need to do, the kinds of things I need to encourage in my team, right? And why this all connects and matters. When we think about oppositional behavior, why don't we want this if we want an agile team or organization? Well, oppositional patterns tend to be resistant to change. They are opposing in nature, prone to inconsistency, and often focus on risk, negativity, and blame. Managers who utilize high levels of oppositional style discourage others from proposing good ideas and solutions. The negativity and focus on insecurity and sorry, it's a little small for me to read here. The negativity and focus on insecurity in the workplace then works against originality, innovation, and the ability of people to try new things. Okay, and again, this plays out, and these patterns are measured across the various levels with different instruments. But hopefully, this is making sense in terms of that kind of resistance, heavily negative focus plays out in individuals along the lines of things like opposing new ideas, being distrustful of others, blaming others for their own mistakes. Teams are those in which there's a high level of conflict or disagreement. Team members feel that they have to defend their points of view, so on and so forth. You hopefully can recognize that those kinds of behaviors, especially when playing out as a consistent and predominant pattern, will begin to have a very strong negative influence on our ability to adapt, learn, share information, and be creative. So those are the short answer to the question of, if we want agility in our people, teams, and business, what behavior do we need, and what behavior do we not need? Hopefully that's interesting insights into the model, and then we'll transfer into our final discussion around the LSI, which is an individual level instrument, looking at thinking and behavioral patterns in individuals, for example, leaders. So now that we know the kind of behavior that drives agility in our business, and by the way, we can actually prove this with clients' own data sets within their own data, then we can be very clear about, well, now I know what I as a leader need to role model and encourage in my team. And I also know the kinds of behavior I need to be particularly careful of using, because that might inhibit our adapt. And now we have that clarity in terms of what we need to do differently in order to drive agile as an outcome result. And I hope as leaders look at this, they're beginning to wonder themselves, well, I wonder how much of this I am actually doing with my team. How often and how consistently am I role modeling those self-actualizing, curious patterns? And how often am I falling into or leveraging that oppositional style that might be unintentionally slowing us down in terms of, again, our ability to be adaptive and creative? And if that's what you're wondering, then we're happy to help, because the LSI is designed to measure exactly that. And that'll be kind of the last piece of our content here. Ali and Juli, I'm sorry, we're getting close to our time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Apologies again for that digital report, but you can see how confidential it is. You can tell your leaders, set their minds at rest. Nobody's seeing this but them. So very good. It's been really great having you. Interested in any other parting thoughts or pieces you'd like to convey, and again, looking forward to working together and collaborating on the case study, which I think is something we need to announce and make available. People will learn a lot from that, and also come back and we'll talk about more experiences coaching leaders and using LSI digital reports.
Cool.
Thank you, John, for having us. And we are curious to learn more about the LSI Digital. And I think you already gave an amazing pathway on what it needs from a behavioral, from a science perspective for people to be ready, to be agile and to develop those behavior patterns, to really embrace AI. And I think that is very beneficial for the audience to learn also what not to develop. And I'm excited to hear more about it. Thank you for giving us this space and for encouraging us and motivating us to continue working with HS tools, and also for always being there with the scientific research knowledge that you share with us, and by this empower our work, and by this also empower the organizations and individuals that we are connected to. So it was really a pleasure. Ali, what would you like to add?
Only, John, we together change the world. That's it.
Feels good, doesn't it? And it's a win-win-win. That's what I really love about. I mean, honestly, we deliver good information to you and your clients. You leverage it, and with your support, they act on it, and it pays off for them. It reflects well on you and us. It's a beautiful synergy. So I'm happy to have been working with you for so long, and I look forward to more.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Well, thank you for everyone who joined and listened. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any other questions or anything that it's not about the name, can help you with, please feel free to reach out at any time.
Thank you.
Then we'll be signing off. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.